So
why don't you move forward? Come on.
What I'm going to do, I'm going to mostly answer questions, and so we'll I'm not sure whether we can answer them, because I certainly did a PhD a long time ago. I've been involved with some, but mostly in the UK, well, only in the UK, US only indirectly. I think Frank has a lot more experience with the US than me, so we can complement each other, hopefully. I've prepared some quick slides, but the slides are, well, you're going to see them, what they are. So the slides are PhD in economics. Why would you want to do a PhD in economics? First question. How do you do a PhD in economics? And then, how much does it cost? Okay? I'm going to say cost, two dimension of cost, money and time. Okay? The long-term investment stage of your life where you probably are most productive in terms of lifetime earnings. Okay, so mistakes now are very expensive, because if you make a mistake at my age, it doesn't matter, because my earning span is not very long ahead of me. But if you make it now, it's going to cost for the rest of your life. Okay, so why me? Was my qualification to give this talk. So if you want to look at my web pages here, I've been director of research student in York in the early 90s, and then at Leicester, and I'm doing it now in Nottingham. I've had 29 PhD students, and I've done 12 PhD examinations, and I've written some articles that you find that in. So that's kind of my. There are some jokes somewhere, but I'm not sure what they are. So. If you look, I'm going to tell you first what the PhD involves. First of all, the official bureaucracy side of it, and then the practical side, and then I'm going to tell you how much it takes, how long it takes to do it. Anybody can ask questions, interrupt, don't worry. Frank, if you want to chip in, please do, because I'm forgetting things. Okay? So if you look at the regulations for a PhD, which is a good point to start, then is a kind of one of these things here, a bound volume that, depending which university you're in, but they're all more or less the same, must contain an original contribution to knowledge or understanding. So that's what you need to do. You're not just, so far, presumably you're all doing Laura Biennale, MSc in Economics or equivalent, am I right? There are no first-year PhD students, so nobody is actually registered as PhD. So that's what you find in the regulation. This is sufficiently vague, as a kind of empty vessel that has some content. Since we're in Italy, you might want to do a PhD in Italy, that's what the law says. Okay? Risultati di rilevante valore scientifico, if you understand Italian, with the final dissertation. This is kind of not really particularly used. So I'm going to go into more details, but first of all I'm going to tell you what is a PhD useful for. You can read this article. I'll leave the slides available for anybody to want to click the links. So this is an article of The Economist, I'm not sure how old, which says it's not really very useful. Okay? And there are pros and cons of a PhD, and the Economist, overall a good newspaper, kind of says, well, it's not obvious that it's very valuable. But if you are going to get a PhD, then this link here will tell you that you are in the right areas here. So there are two jokes here. Stop with that now. These are kind of further links that you can look. The illustrated guide to a PhD from Business Insider, the PhD Lounge, lots of tips to current students. There's a website linked up in one of these, of photographs of PhD student rooms, which again you probably don't want to have here. Okay, let's look at the practical side. In the US, if I'm not wrong, in the top schools, the ones I'm really familiar with, you get 2 years of intensive courses, sometimes 1 year and a half, but really quite a lot of intensive courses, and then more or less followed by 3 years on average of writing. Some people are a bit faster, some people are a bit slower, but that's kind of the length of time. The UK, I call it old style because a lot of UK universities, especially the top ones, are moving towards this model. But if you look at a place like, say, Nottingham or York or Essex, then you still get the old style timetable, which is the following. You do 1 year MSc, then you do 3 years of research, and then you have 1 year of writing up. So if you add up, then you find that in both cases there's 5 years time. So we're talking about a long time. There is a consequence of this, and it's again something in favor of the US style, which is here, if you secure funding, you're fine, because the funding is one source that then, unless you do something very bad, you keep until the end. Okay? It comes with strings attached, often, not always, but often does. The UK, having these 3 different levels implies that you need 3 separate sources of funding. So you need to worry first of all about getting funding from the MSc, then getting funding for a 3-year PhD. Then you've finished and you've got 1 year that you need to eat something, and so you need some form of funding for the writing up period. So that's a bad thing about the UK, but things are changing. I'm just now negotiating with my head of school to have a 3-year scholarship for our PhD students in Nottingham. Okay, let's look at the ideal candidate here, the ideal time scale that would apply that. So this is, I stress, is the ideal time scale. So you are now in your first year of the laurea magistrale of the MSc in economics. Okay, so some people are not, and therefore they are already kind of late for that. And your aim is starting a job here. Okay, I'll talk in a minute about jobs, but that's what's at the end. That's a carrot at the end of all this time and all this effort and expenditure. Okay, so a tenure track job. I put a very broad range of salary. So 100K. There are several universities in the US that pay that level to assistant professors.
Actually, more. I would say there's more now.
It's probably more now.
110, 120.
Yeah.
For a 9-month stipend.
Yeah. Okay.
So you can add summer money.
Yeah, if you get it.
Well, typically
yeah.
universities often give you the summer money on top of the regular stipend. So we are talking more about 140, 150. In the business school is way higher. So that's economics department. For an economist in a business school, we are talking between 150 and 200. Well, I mean,
that's
compared to the miserable salary
that's
of a junior assistant professor in Italy, is amazing.
That's cool.
I mean, in Italy it's 1,300 euros per month.
Is it? Yeah. It's less than that. So that's kind of a range that's not, excluding tails, the end tails and the top tails. There are these are kind of average. I took the figure from a report which is linked and gives between 100 and 110 as the average starting salary of a tenure track assistant professor in the US. In Europe it's less, in some parts of Europe it's more, and so on. Okay, so to get this, so we talk about September 2022, starting when you start getting your first paycheck, okay? When do you know that? That's the crucial date if you want an academic job, that to send so. And that's when you go on the job market. That happens in January 2022. I've got a series of slides that your Asian colleagues have seen on the exact details of the job market. I've got quick slides from that talk there. And how do you do it? You basically apply to between 100 and 150 institutions in that short slot of time. Okay? And hopefully one of them will give you a job starting 9 months later in September. So,
Let me say,
yes.
it looks like an enormous number, In fact, it's all now done via internet.
Yeah.
There are platforms
Yeah.
like Econ Job Market is one of them. Or job opening for
Yeah.
economists, and it's very, very simple.
Yeah.
In fact,
The students.
you upload your CV, your statement, your papers, and then you indicate your who is going to write letters of recommendation, and that's it. So, although it looks like a big number, you don't have to make raccomandata con ricevuta di ritorno, 150 of them that have to be sent off. You go to the post office. That was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And
So there's the cost of the cost of the first application is very, very high because you've got to, we work 6 years towards the first application. Once you've got one, the others have zero marginal cost. So this is what the students we recommend we support at Nottingham. They came with their Excel file, said these are the university I think of applying for, and I said remove some, add some, and they end up with a list of about 120, and they sent all the applications. So that's the kind of the crucial date where your life changes. Once you get a job here, it's not a job for life because you got tenure track. In some countries, like the UK, you could be dismissed. Did you have a question? In some countries, you may lose your job for a variety of reasons. But if you do well here, that's good news because it pays for all the time and effort and money that you spend. So how do you get from here to there? Slowly. So this year, from now, if you are in the first year, from now until kind of late September, December, so for the next 12 months you apply for PhDs. Okay? If you are in the second year, you've got to do it now very quickly, very rapidly. One condition if you want to do it in the United States and in the UK style, I'm not going to repeat this every time, there are many UK universities that are getting towards the US style, so US style UK universities. At the moment they are LSE, UCL, Warwick, Oxford, I don't know about Cambridge, it's probably a bit old-fashioned. In Europe there are several places, again, you probably know that better than me, where you need the same things as for the US university, like Barcelona, Toulouse, Brussels, Amsterdam, Florence, the European Institute. So, they all ask for something, so each university will have different requirements, but they're not very different from each other. One typical one is the GRE. Okay, that's an exam, which I've not done. It costs some money to do it. Elizabeth has asked me to tell you that the school, I'm not sure who, the university, you will get some refund if you do well in this exam. Some part refund of the fees. She has explicitly said how much, yes.
What is a good mark on this exam for it not to be a problem in your application?
I have no idea. I think it depends a lot on which university. So each university sets its own level, I think.
Well, it's more, you would like to think in terms of percentile.
Yeah.
And you should perhaps ignore, the GRE is made of 3 parts, analytical, verbal, and quantitative. The one that really matters is the quantitative, and you should try to be in the 95th percentile.
95th.
Above the 90.
Okay.
And if you are aiming high, you should be in the 95th percentile. Now, it's hard because Chinese students do wonderful in the GRE. They really train for years, and it shows. They are a major source of problems for European students because even if the training, I think, of European students is perhaps better, Chinese are more mathematically inclined, and they really take very, very seriously the training for the GRE, so they tend to do very well.
There's a lot of them. So.
Yeah, besides, yeah.
So that's yes.
Are there any courses to prepare to the GRE?
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
sure
sure
there
they are. On the web, you can find practice, yes. Yeah.
But there are some of our students that are now starting or started PhD in US universities will have done that.
But look, the GRE quantitative is basic math. You should know these things. The difference with respect to the way in which you guys study is that what you have to know is not just the theory. You have to be able to solve problems very quickly, which is something that typically you are not, you don't learn in the Italian system. You memorize a lot, but you don't do lots and lots of small problems in which you use the ideas that you have memorized. You just reproduce.
But that's now if you're seriously thinking about this, then you need to start looking at fast exams.
And you have to learn to manage the time that you have available, which is another thing that in Italy you don't learn. In fact, you stay at school longer than you should, precisely because you have not been told that, number one, time is valuable, and number two, you have to organize yourself in order to not to waste it.
So the timing to do it is now. So you sit the GRE in this period from July to September, October. I'm not sure that there are official dates when that happens. And then you apply. The application period is typically now. So some universities are already closed in the US, some European one is still open. So it varies by university. So I'll tell you how many universities should apply for a lot. And so you need to look at websites, see what the requirements are, what you need, and what the deadline for application. So if you want to do it well, make yourself an Excel file, university, pros and cons, cost, do they have scholarships, do they have something, date of application, and other information and so on. Name of people who are there. Look, there will be lots of websites, Facebook groups and all that, with student comments from students and so on. Find out what that is. Places. But, you know, now is the time to think. When you've got some free time instead of watching football, which is not very good anyway, then spend time browsing websites of US universities to do it properly.
I really recommend that you do it in August and September, because in July you still have exams. Yeah. And then in September, at the end of September, you start again with the second year. And I don't think it's a good idea to do too many things at the same time. It's already a terrible idea to finish your laureate triennale while starting the biennium. Preparing for the GRE and at the same time keep up with your study is also a terribly bad idea. So you should avoid doing this. You sacrifice maybe 1 or 2 weeks in August and September, a little less vacation, but you focus on the GRE, and once it's done, it's done. Okay?
But then, you know, it's a good practice, because if you do a PhD, one thing that you will not be able to do is sleep. Okay? PhD students don't sleep, because they have to work so hard. Not even joking. Okay, so you're here now, so in the academic year 2016-2017, you finish your degree, you graduate around here, and then you're ready to start. So this summer, 2017, if things are going to schedule, you leave. You take bag, your suitcase, your cutting string, and you go. Yeah.
Something that I've seen by browsing the various schools at the university is the difference between Master of Research and the Master of Philosophy.
I'm going to tell you about these things. Yeah. Where did you look in the UK?
LSE and UCL.
Yeah. I'm going to be specific about this, what they mean. But well, I can do it now, because I told you about this. So UK university are shifting from this model. So this is still the case in Nottingham. Okay, so in Nottingham we take students who have already a good MSc in economics. Okay, maybe from Nottingham, maybe from somewhere else. It doesn't really matter. Maybe from abroad. It doesn't have to be UK, but we check on their postgraduate qualifications, and then they become PhD, and okay. So in the US, you see, you have 2 years of intensive courses. Now, because of the quirkiness of the UK bureaucracy, a PhD cannot be longer than 3 years. Okay, so there's a rule, governmental rule. You think governmental rules are only in Italy, but they exist in the UK as well. So the governmental rule in the UK says the PhD cannot last longer than...
In Italy as well now.
Yeah, I know, but
Yeah.
that's the UK, where in theory everything is flexible. So this is not flexible. So the LSE, Warwick, well, let me just say LSE, Warwick and UCL. I'm not sure about it. Certainly LSE and Warwick, they have the 2-year MRes, Master of Research, which is that 2-year intensive course. So you're not registered for PhD, because if you are, then it becomes a 5-year PhD, and the government doesn't like that. So LSE go around this rule of the 3-year by calling the first 2 years of the PhD, they call it MRes. Nobody wants an MRes as a standing alone degree. But that allows them to, first of all, train people with these courses. Second, to select them. Okay, so typically, if you want a PhD scholarship at LSE, you need to have distinction in the MRes. Okay, if you don't, then life becomes difficult. So that's the way. Oxford is the same, but it's much older. Oxford has always had a 2-year MSc as the preparation. In the past, people, when I was there, people like John Vickers graduated just a couple of years before me, and he had a 2-year MSc, MPhil, as it was, and then just 1 year PhD. So the PhD was a bit more, but not much. Now Oxford are doing US style, so they have added, they've kept the MPhil 2 years. So MPhil is a 2-year, like an MRes, similar. So the MRes is the way the UK-style university go around the government rule, but it's just a label. So it's like these 2 years intensive courses. Other universities are not doing that yet, but we are moving in that direction. So in Nottingham, for example, the first year of this is quite a lot of intensive courses and so on. Okay, any other questions? Do ask questions. So how do you get, I was saying, how you get to here? So you graduate, and then you move, you catch the plane, go to Boston, New York, wherever. And so first year coursework, there will be exams at the end. So I call it MRes here because it could be the first year of the MRes. If you could be already registered PhD, you might be doing MSc somewhere else. Second year PhD, the same course, wherever you register, coursework and research. There might be more exams here, but the second work, in most places, the second year of courses is just reading papers. You just read 100, 200, 300 papers. First year is foundation, exercise, micro, macroeconometrics, first year. Second year, let's read the last 10 papers on the subject published in the top journals. And you read papers and you kind of do presentation, you read them, you summarize them, you just do this kind of stuff. You read so many papers, and then all you need to do is write one paper of your own. That's what the PhD is going to be. Okay? So they train you. Look, these are the best papers published in the past 10 years. Read them all. So coursework and research, that's what you do. You read papers, you start writing here, and you carry on writing. Okay? So, this is when... So notice that you still write up your PhD after you've got a job. Okay, and that's typical. So when you get a job here, the people who are now, they're about to catch the plane to go to, what is it, San Francisco?
San Francisco.
Yeah, this is San Francisco, the annual meeting. And so they are writing on their CV, thesis expected to be defended in June 2016. Okay, so you apply for a job, you get the job without a PhD. And then you get the PhD. So really, the deadline is here, not so much when you have the Bible, in a sense. Once you've got a job, that's more or less a formality. Of course, if you get a job, it means that you've got enough, more than enough, to satisfy the examiners. So you kind of set a very high bar, because the bar to get the PhD is lower than the one you need to get a good job. Okay? So that's the time you need to aim for. So you need to have your PhD ready around here. Okay, around at the end of the summer 2021, if you want to start.
Can I just say something?
Yes.
Maybe it was misleading the idea that a PhD thesis is a bound book. Is
I'm going to say
misleading
something
because that was the old-time sort of idea, which is still perhaps in some area like the humanities, they still think this way. In economics, people think of a PhD dissertation as a collection of potentially publishable articles. How many? 3 to 4. One of which is your flagship, is your job market paper. Is the paper that you carry around and you present in seminars if you are invited after the job market to a fly out. So there is a hierarchy in these theses. There is one chapter or paper that is the most important, the one that you are really proud of and you show around. The other ones must be also good, but maybe not as good as this one. What's going on now is that in the United States, at least, the duration of a PhD is more than 5 years. I would say 6 these days. But this comes with a string. The number of papers that typically a job market candidate can exhibit is, at least in a top university, is at least 2 or 3. So you are going to compete. The competition is not just over the best first paper, but is becoming a competition over the best 2 or 3 papers.
Yeah.
Because 6 years, the idea is, all right, fine, but you can't just show one paper. In 6 years, you must be. You must have been able to produce a little more than just one paper.
Yeah, I mean, there are, I mean, I've not been this year on the job market, so I've seen no application this year, but in the past 2 years, you know, I've seen, in the past 5 years, I've seen 4 sets of job market applications. And it's true, if you have 2 papers, if it takes 6 years, you need to have 2 papers. Both of them must be good. But there are many people who still have a single paper, then something else. And then they, you know, people look at the trade-off. How long did it take? Only got 1 paper, that maybe it's not very solid.
That's
then
right.
that
Doesn't look good.
So there is a bit of a trade-off. You know, because in the UK we are constrained. I mean, in the UK we cannot. People are now, including Warwick LSE, people must submit within the 4th year, so 2 plus 4. And if you don't submit within that, unless you get pregnant or have serious health problems, that's it, you're out. Okay, because of university under pressure from the government. I've been saying since I've learned this is stupid, and everybody agrees with me, but nobody's in any position to do anything. Okay? So that's not going to change. So, if, for example, I've got a slide. Okay, let me just finish my my slides, but I've got slides about what constitutes a PhD. So your VIVA or oral examination is here. So it's a huge cost. Okay, in terms of time, remember these are your best years in terms of value of investment. So you really want to consider whether to do it. So that's a stick, that's a carrot at the end. The stick is all of that. Many places you get some money here from the institution. So a lot of the top US university will give you some funding in this region. That should be dollars. So between $13,000 and $25,000.
Yale offered 36.
36
2
today.
years ago.
Right.
They might have updated. I would
so
not be
even
surprised if
more.
Yale offers 40.
Even more generous. So that's kind of so maybe it's 25,000 Yale.
No, I would say that, I mean, Princeton is 25, 30, and I would say that it's 20 and higher.
Anyway, it's enough to have a student life adequate, but you can't really buy a cruise with that. It comes with teaching attached.
But usually the teaching is after the first 2 years.
Yes, no, yeah.
So it's...
So that's with some, every institution does different. The teaching is good. If you apply for a job with no teaching, people think, why is she not that
Yeah.
teaching?
No,
So
actually, teaching experience is important.
It's
In
important.
these job market applications, there is always some line that says, oh, he's a very good teacher, you can rely on him or her, that's an important component.
when they say 3 referees, it's always used often people put 4 referees, one of whom is the person in charge of teaching. And says, so-and-so has been a teaching assistant for us and has done this course, and always had excellent reports from the students, etc. So it's work, but it's useful work. Career plus you learn something that is not useful. Okay, so that's my kind of, I'm going to blow that up. Here it is the what's happening in the job market. So I told you about a talk on the job market, and this is one slide of the talk. So the US model is this one. So you go to San Francisco this year, every year is different, you can look up on the website where it's going to be in the next years. The top 200, the US top 200 to 400, some year, depending on how the market goes, at some point California was not hiring because there are budget cuts and all of that. And there's about 1,000 candidates. That's the rumor I heard when I was there in Chicago in 2013. All the top I call them non-university academic institutions, places like IMF, World Bank, all of the central banks, a lot of kind of research centers of various types. They all recruit in this way, exactly the same way. They want the same CV, the same qualification, etc. Obviously, if you have a CV that is suitable for the work, for the IMF, say, developing economics or much more policy-oriented, that's fine. Some universities will not be interested in you if they have a theory job or a econometric theory job, etc. But the process is the same. A lot of people apply to both. Some people more interested in this type of job might apply to universities that have more public policy oriented group, etc. That essentially is everybody compete at this top 200, 400 university and all this non-university academic institution all compete for the same pool of candidates. A lot of more and more European schools go there, a lot of continental Europe schools go there, all the top Norwegian, some French, many Belgian, Dutch, Spanish, and so on.
And now Chinese.
Chinese are now beginning, yes. Hong Kong has been going for a long time.
Singapore.
Yeah, Singapore, yeah. Australia, all Canadian. So there's a lot, and more coming, is an attractor. Some universities in the UK still recruit in the traditional way, where you have formal interviews, application date in March, they get about 15 applications. So when we advertised here, we got 400 applications because applying is very cheap. And whereas if you put an advertisement in June for a lectureship at University of Norwich, then you get 50, 20 applications and so on. Because people like you, all the people there don't want to apply. And then, anyway, I'm not going into the detail. In Italy, of course, you still have the concourse.
Well, I mean, Italy has some exceptions.
Yes,
I mean, the exceptions are Bocconi.
Bocconi will be there.
EUI, European University Institute, sort of.
Yeah.
Because they place their students on the American
They
market.
do that.
Yeah. EIF here in Rome.
Yeah. The Lucca place, they go to the US market.
Napoli, actually, the Pagano Iapelli Center.
Yeah.
They've been on the market for like 8, 10 years.
The Bank of Italy is there.
Bank of Italy, yes, they now go.
There,
Yes.
yeah.
So you have some.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The universities in Italy do that.
Except Bocconi.
Yeah, of course. It is. I mean, the way you need to know this. In the US, people are describing the academic job market as a dual labor market. The standard model of dual labor markets for the developing world that developing economists have studied. There's a part of it with people have a high salary tenure, and then there's the rest. There's no security, no pay. So every time you see adjunct professor, somebody who says they are an adjunct professor at Princeton, they just do donkey work, renewed every 12 months. You know, what you want to be is assistant professor, associate professor, or professor. These are the really...
Actually, top universities don't use much of these.
Some of the business schools do.
Yeah, business schools is
Yeah.
different, but where you see these kind of adjunct professors,
No.
is like a second-tier university.
Yes, because that many
Yeah,
students.
like Georgetown is not a top university, and they rely a lot on.
But many of the top business schools, some of these adjunct professors are really good people. They do it because they've got the CEO of some company and they want some university. So they're not all bad, but they don't have tenure. They don't need it because they already earn £2 million a year as CEO of some finance company, and they also do some hobby teaching, MBAs or something. But you know, when you see people's CV, if you do think about this distinction between the two markets that are very separate and much more different in terms of pay and security and so on. So if you click on that, if you click on this, it just come out, this Inomics, the salary report, many pages, and this is their summary here. So that's what they say, 102 average in the US for assistant professor. Switzerland, if you want to do a PhD, if you can, that's how much they pay, and so on. So you can study salaries and everything. Okay. So what you know, I describe when I tell people, you know, what Frank was saying earlier. You know, who do you need to impress with your PhD? These people, the job appointment panels. Okay, a PhD is really useful. It's not a hobby. It's not training to something else. It's really a certificate that says, look, this is what I've done. Okay, so it certifies that you can do original research, and sometimes I want to see just the potential, and I'll trust the potential, but I would like to do more. Okay, as Frank was saying earlier, people used to write books. Okay, people don't write books in economics anymore. Okay, economists don't write economics. It's not just an exaggeration to say that. Since 1960, all original contributions to economics have appeared in papers in the book, but the books are simply a collection of stapled articles. Okay, 1960, theory of value, the Breu, there was something original there, but since then, nothing new has appeared in a book. So economists have been writing books since, for the past, not been writing books with their original work. This is not true, this is crucial work, but that's not relevant here. This is true in the physical sciences. Scientists don't write books, they just write articles. It's not true in most other social sciences. It certainly wasn't true prior to 1960, and it's not true in many humanities. Okay, so you can become a professor with an excellent biography of Virginia Woolf, for example. Okay, book, etc. But in economics, that's the rule of the game. You want to be an economist, that's the game. Okay, so...
Can I just say
yeah,
one thing? You mentioned before that there is this writing up period that is like 1 year or more.
Yeah.
And this is, I would say, true both in England and in the US, because once your dissertation is closed, then you have to turn your chapters into papers that you send off, and that's not a trivial task, because usually the way in which, also based on the comments that you receive at the time you defend your dissertation, but the way in which typically chapters are written down is a little crude. it takes sometimes to write an effective article. Especially things like the introduction and the conclusions are extremely important. And often when people write a dissertation chapter, they don't pay much attention to these details. Okay?
Yeah, I find when I go through these 200 applications or more, I find often, I read the introduction to get an idea of the paper, and I say, I don't understand what this paper is about. I then go and read the references. A good reference will summarize the job market paper very well, and I very often understand the paper much better having read the reference of the referee than the paper itself. That means the paper is good. Paper is good because the referee tells me, and I'm understanding having read the referee's reference, the professor, the supervisor's comment. But obviously, if you can't convey that, if your supervisor is conveying the value of the paper better than you, the paper is not ready. Even people who have good training, job market papers ready, etc., it will take them to do it. But in a sense, that's polish. That's to get them published. If you get a good job market paper, then you're going to pass your PhD. That's a rough rule. Okay? You might not get in the top journals because the paper is not ready. So, okay, in the past, or as Frank was saying, then we switched from the book to 2 or 3 publishable papers. Therefore, people, when you read the regulation of universities, a thesis must be less than 100,000 words. Now, 100,000 words is a kind of ridiculous amount of pages. It's about 400 pages. And people ask, does 100,000 means I have to write 70,000 words? No, it doesn't. Thesis of 10,000 words, perfectly good, so long as the content is there. Okay? So length is definitely not something regarding articles. Maybe it's important in other aspects of life, but regarding articles. So editors will tell you, shorten it. It's very rare that you send the paper to a journal and the editor says, well, we liked the journal, the paper, but we want it a bit longer. No, they say we want it about half the length you sent it. So, 2-3 substantial chapter, and I say there must be good reason to exceed 100 pages, so that's what you need to aim for. It might be good reason because you've got lots of tables, because you've got lots of code, something, but there must be good reason. Another model, the one that I'm kind of pressing for it because of the time stricture that we have in the UK. I think, if you had more time, it would be better to have 2 chapters, 3 chapters, all good. But in the UK, we are forced to put a time limit, and within that time limit is better. The trade-off to quality is better to improve the quality. Because I'm just telling you about the UK. In the US, listen to what the appliers will say. So I kind of, when I describe it, I've changed this in Nottingham 2 years ago with 2 or 3 chapters. I said the difference, it's like a long jump competition and a diving competition. The difference in the rule. In the long jump, the best jump matters, the rest doesn't count. In the diving competition, it's all average. Okay? So that's in the UK or in the job market, people will look at your best paper. And then when they've got 10 people with all excellent papers, which one do we choose? Let's go and look at the second best chapter. And if that's also good, perhaps in a different topic, etc., then that's good. That leads to the cutting edge. But really, with short time, 4 years is a dramatically short time, I think all your effort will want to go to your best chapter. Then you have to have something else. But that something else is going to be judged as the additional chapter, and you realize you didn't have much time because you have time constraints, etc. So as I say, at least another substantial chapter. Again, chapters can be long, like within 100 pages. Okay, so how do you choose where to apply? PhD, you just apply. In the MSc, in the UK, you need a good MSc. Okay, what does good mean? That depends on universities. Okay, so they will have, 100. If you get 105 or more, you will have Biennale. That's Biennale. Yes, that's probably enough. So, People have a research project. If I understand correctly, this is almost irrelevant in the US because they look at your exams and your reference where you come from, both the GRE and the university
And there is
exams.
this idea that whatever research project you might have, after you get there, you change your mind. So,
in the UK, old style, we still, traditional UK university, we still look at that. We, in Nottingham, we just look at it as a sample of how people can write. Can they ask a good economics question and so on? And then change them. You know, some people say, I want to solve all the problems of the world. That's not going to get admission because it just can't. So as I said, the research project is a bit of a relic from the past because we are aware. Exams are better. When some university asks for a writing sample, so it might be good that you can invest well in your dissertation because it might be what somebody asks you to see. So if you've done it well, then that's good. That might help. You send that, and that's fine. How do you choose a school? So where do you apply for? You should apply to as many places as possible. The drawback is that many places ask for an application fee. So if you start, I'll apply for 100 universities, but then each asks for $50, it gets costly. So you need to be selective. You need to be realistic where you can go. And you know, some of our best students, I'm talking about students that, for example, have an average mark in the exam of 30. And who had very strong references and had quite a high GRE, applied to many of the top universities. She's now in Boston University, which is an extremely good place, but she did get rejections from other top places. She did have other acceptances, so she applied to, I can't remember the number, so for a number of universities she got some acceptance, but not everyone took her. So, you know, be realistic, talk to supervisor, talk to other people, other students and so on, and see what you need. If it's free, you might as well apply, but if you have to pay $50, you know, it's worth doing it sometime, but not if the chances of getting in are very low. So, you need to look what the school is. The best model is the top 50 US school. And this is what LSE, Oxford, Warwick are trying to do. This is what I'm trying to push the school to do, to copy what they're doing, because that's the best. Here, you know, unlike papers, size matters. You want to be in the, if you do, you know, obviously if you're in Princeton, you get good colleagues, good teachers, and so on. But if you need to go the tier below, 2 tiers below, then you may want to start looking at the size of the PhD program. Okay? A big PhD program implies, first of all, there is structure there. There will be courses, there will be somebody in charge, there will be support staff that look after you, they can organize your references, they organize courses, they invite people, etc. So you want to make sure there are enough students. And then the other reason is that if there are 50 students, there will be somebody that you can talk to. Most of your time, most of your interaction will be with your fellow students. Student conference, you know, drinking coffee at 3 o'clock in the morning, talking about the last bit of stata code that you've written, that's essential. You do it with your fellow student, not with your supervisor. Organizing conferences, more formal events, they're easier if there are 50 people rather than 10. Okay? So look at the size, look how many students there are, look where they go. Every good PhD school will say, our students have got jobs at Duke, Iowa State, blah, blah, blah. They will tell you. So you see where they get jobs and how many get jobs. And so get information about the school and see what it's like. Quality, you know, it's not just novice that you'd be better off at Yale than at Kansas State University. You get better professors and better students as colleagues. There's a stratification both on the professor side and on the student side, so you want to have as good colleagues as you can. As I said, most university will give you something.
Well, also for one reason, your colleagues today at school are going to be often your colleagues tomorrow in the university you will be teaching.
Yeah.
And they represent the network that you start from for your career later.
Yeah, so, you know, we just hired somebody and we asked, how, you know this student that comes from the same place? And they say, yes, it's excellent. Fine. So yeah, the network is there. And, you know, many universities will give you some money, perhaps not straight away, but from year 1 or 2, so it might be worth finding that information about. What should you write your PhD on? I would not do it. I would just try to delay the choice as much as possible. You have plenty of time to change your topic. Many people, there are some people who are still working at their own time on what they wrote their PhD on, but most people have changed. So, you know, if you like development economics, but you happen to be in a school where there are no development economists, change the topic because it makes a lot of sense. So trying to get a good school, if you're in the school, trying to get a supervisor that you see will support you, even if that means change, not doing macro as I wanted originally, but doing experimental economics or something else. Okay? It's much more important to have supported supervisor than I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. So don't stick to a topic because that's all what you've always wanted to do. Get a PhD, your training in a topic will be useful whatever you want to study. Once you've got your tenure track, then you can do what you want. So supervisor is useful because they help you with the literature, they give you academic support, occasionally pastoral support, so if you have a crisis, then they help, they do research guidance, career advice, and so on. So, you know, when you apply for a job, it's important to have structure there. Again, if they have experience of placing 4 or 5, 10 students a year, they know where you can go. They will realistically tell you, look, there's no point you applying in this set of schools, go to the next year because you can start with a much better chance if you don't want to apply. So career advice is something that they do. Thinks that this is kind of a list, you can read that quickly if you want, it's not that interesting. So that's what the supervisor should do, and that's the kind of person you want to look at, and what should the supervisor not do. In the UK, they ask you to teach, but they pay you, and it's not the supervisor that asks you to teach, but it's the school, and you get paid. Organized conference, I mean, that's not something that US schools do, but you find that in some smaller places, you get, in Italy, that's happened. If you go to in Italy, you would be asked to organize conference, phone the seminar speaker, take the seminar speaker to lunch, because we'll go and pick him up from the airport, etc. And that's the way they're calling banks and so on. You know, you need to, they have a job and you don't, okay? And so they need to help you. They shouldn't be competing with you, and especially shouldn't try to seduce you. So I think the next one is the last slide. Again, it's a joke, not mine, but it's from a very useful trick, if you don't know, it's called TVerPhDforMSc2015, which I occasionally, 3 minutes or 1 minute, I browse, and that's kind of the story. It will happen. I've done it, and so I can sympathize with the supervisor there, because that's life. And write a paper, then one day something seems a good idea, and the next day seems a terrible idea. And so okay, I've finished this. I think, yes, this is the last slide. So, any further questions?
Let me say something briefly, because I have a class in a few minutes. How you should prepare yourself for the application. As I said, try to get your GRE done by early fall. Okay? And then, like September, October, look at the programs in Europe and the US that you might be interested in, and come up with a list that, for the reasons you mentioned, should be something like 10 to 15. And then find someone that here at Tor Vergata that can somehow give you some piece of advice, and think very hard also about who can write letters for you. You need generally 3 letters of recommendation, and it's a delicate balance because the person that writes this letter must be knowledgeable of what you did and what's your strengths and maybe weaknesses. So he or she must be able to, when in the letter, it must be clear that this person has private information that gets conveyed to the admission committee. But at the same time, this person must have some basic reputation, because so it's a sort of delicate. This person must be known to some extent, but this person must also know you well enough. So you have to think very carefully who can write a letter for you based on these 2 criteria. The other thing that you should do is take care of your curriculum vitae, because the CVs that I've seen are really horrible. I mean, they are these standardized pseudo-European CVs that are really... What you should do is go select top 5, 6 places, 1 or 2 in Europe, and the other 3, 4 in the US. Look at the CVs of the students that are on the job market this year. They all have their CV on the department that you, let's say, LSE. You go to the website, you look at who are the job market candidates, you download 1 or 2 CVs, you do the same for other universities, and then you write your own CV. Please don't use this horrible, standardized European crappy CV. It doesn't look good at all. Okay? And then what else? Letters, GRE. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the statement or research statement. That is sort of not. I mean, I'm not saying that it's a waste of time, but you should be honest. Don't say that. Don't copy from the literature the introduction of some papers and present as if it was your research goal. I mean, that's not a good idea. You might say, I'm generally interested in this area, and you might explain why you are generally interested in this area, but the understanding is that you will change your mind and you're a very unsophisticated researcher. You're just starting. So, you can't possibly have a very clear idea about what you're going to do.
And so that's what Franco was saying. Right, LSE job market candidate, that's what you get, and that's what really issued. And it's 2 pages. No, this is 5, so that's a bit of an exception, but I bet there are papers here. So in your case, I think anything longer than...
Yeah, you would write your MSc or whatever studies instead of doctoral studies. You write MSc studies. You indicate where the title of your... by the way, by November of your second year, you should have a pretty good idea of what you are going to write on. Yeah. Otherwise, it's a bit late. Okay? Because you want to defend your master's thesis here at Tor Vergata by July, because then you're leaving in September. So don't do what you did 2 years ago or 1 year ago, that you defended at the end of October or early November when your biennial had already started by a month and a half. No way. You have to finish. may ask you to be there already at the beginning of August for their math camp, which is, or stat camp.